Here we go. So this is our 13th Barichara update and our 15th or 16th week of attempting Barichara updates, with a couple of exceptions where Colombian bureaucracies and visa requirements forced me to be on days of travel, or we had Common Land visiting us and Will and Forwerda. But yeah, we've been doing this for like 3 months now almost, and it's been wonderful. And I'm really excited that Shane has joined us. I think, Shane, you're the only person who hasn't been to one of these calls before. So maybe if you'd like to just very briefly say hello and introduce yourself, and then you'll be surrounded by strangers, but at least we'll know who you are.
Sounds good. Hey, I'm Shane. I'm living up in Northern Ontario, Canada right now. Just connected with Joe a few days ago. Been messaging back and forth about the ReFi event. My main work right now is with Holochain on a project called the REA Place Space, where it's a value flows modeler. So people can use the value flows ontology to model whatever economic activity they want to. So a pretty powerful tool, and it's starting to become coming into a phase where it's actually somewhat usable. So we're looking for people to try and test it out and see what we can do with it, see what the limits of it are, and help drive the development of that project. And when I'm not plugged into the matrix, I'm growing mushrooms at my shop. So I'm a gourmet mushroom cultivator and forager as well.
Yes,
a little bit
I think we have a beautiful relationship, Shane, because I'm a gourmet mushroom eater. And I'm actually, my ex and I are both pretty accomplished mushroom foragers. We lived in Seattle for about 10 years, and yeah, and in Eugene, Oregon for about 4 years. And suffice it to say, I'm capable of being a connoisseur when called upon.
Cool. Thanks for the invitation, Joe.
No, lovely to have you here. And how long are you able to stay? Because you said you had back-to-back calls.
Yeah, I got 25 more minutes. Sweet.
So what I'm going to do today for everyone is I've actually put together slides. In the last 2 weeks, I didn't put together slides and we talked about what was going on. But this time I wanted to give some visual representation to what is happening with the Gitcoin funding round as it relates to ReFi Barichara, as it relates to what this whole thing is all about, which is how to create a planetary network of bioregional learning centers and bioregional regenerative economies. And so I want to sort of pull us back to that bigger context a little today, because what we're doing right now with Gitcoin, while small, and I mean, it's kind of cool that we're one of the best performing grants in the climate funding round, and we're currently at about $19,000, and could easily jump up, and we're in like the top 6 or 7 projects, depending on how they're measured at the moment. But that's not what's interesting. What's interesting is the way we're using Gitcoin to support the formation of alliances, and how the formation of alliances is enabling us to do fundraising well, but is also setting the stage for ReFi Barichara and what's actually important, which is not a 5-day event, but what are we trying to gather all these people to do? And what kinds of changes in mindset are we trying to create so that this space that's called ReFi, which many of you may not even know what the heck that means, is sort of a catchword for people who have their heads in the digital clouds that we really wish would get their fingers in the dirt. And there aren't enough of them who do. And there are plenty of them who are in that space that are themselves frustrated that their fingers aren't in the dirt. And just as a beautiful later in the process than others, Benji, I like to think of you as someone who's worked with software, who is perfectly happy to not play with tech anymore and just be entirely in the community process, as an exemplar of where we want ReFi to go. So Benji, I'm just going to give you a little prod on that one. So what I want to do is I want to share some slides so you can see some pictures of things that are happening in Barichara, and I can give a bit more conceptual scaffolding to what is actually very complex what's happening. But I don't think it'll be as overwhelming as other Joe telling complex stories about Barichara, because I'm going to stay focused on one topic this time. But I'm going to jump into that because I want Shane to see it. And then hopefully I'll get a chance to meet all of you a little bit more. And if not, we'll be sure that happens soon. So with that, I'm going to share my screen and start with this beautiful photo here of our lovely friend, Tyler, who's on the call with us. This is Tyler and me in Las Albercas, the land where we're nearly finished with the purchase of the land to create a community space that will be the home of the Barichara Ecoversity. And in the last 2 weeks, Tyler and I have been spending a lot of mornings getting blisters and sore muscles by taking machetes and cutting trails. Because after this, you know, once in 80-year rainy season, or probably once in 200-year rainy season, it hasn't happened in at least 80 years. Everything is overgrown when normally it would look like desert. And so we have been hacking away at the trails with machetes and getting things ready. And Tyler could tell you all about that during the discussion part of today's call. But I like this picture because for me, this symbolizes entering into the territory instead of just talking about the territory. Because as some of you know, I've been talking about the land Las Albercas becoming the ecoversity for 2 whole years. And we didn't start actual work on the land until Tyler and I took machetes and started clearing trails. And so going from talking about the land to entering the land literally has been happening with Las Albercas in the last 2 weeks. And so for me, that's symbolic of what the depth of change is for bringing people from all across the planet into the territory. Because as all of you know who have been following our work, we're very deeply in the territory with a lot of projects, a lot of on the ground work, but this entry point into the ecoversity as a physical space is actually new, even though the ecoversity has existed in one form or another for a few years. And I wanted to introduce you to one of the very special people in Barichara that I've never taken a photo of to share with you. This is a very special man and one of my personal heroes. This is Don Jesus. Don Jesus is the caretaker on the land of Bioparque Moncora. So you've all heard me talk a lot about Camila and Vicky, the 2 women that founded the Bioparque and held it and sustained it for 14 years. And I didn't tell you the story of Don Jesus, but he's the day-to-day caretaker. And he's my personal hero because I have been imitating his practices of solitude, community service, and humility as he just quietly goes to the Bioparque, plants trees, maintains land, prunes things, just does all kinds of work that no one knows he does, that no one thanks him for, and he's paid almost nothing to do it. And actually a lot of his financial support in the last 1.5 years has come from the Barichara Regeneration Fund. So those of you who've been supporting this work have been paying for Don Jesus to be a caretaker of the Bioparque. And I just wanted you to see him. He is 70 years old. He's a campesino man. He's descended from the Guanay people of this territory. He was born and raised here. Judging by my conversations with him, I'd say he has about a 6th grade or 7th grade formal education level. He's pretty bad with numbers, but he's amazing at knowing the native truths and is just completely devoted to the land and completely devoted to the territory. This is a man who was born here, lived here all his life, and will bury his bones here. And there was never a question about where he would bury his bones. We can learn so much from Don Jesus. So I wanted you to just see him. It's a beautiful man. Here are Milena and Mago, these 2 women who are working with one of the children's groups forming around the community education fund that we're creating as part of the Territorial Foundation. And I wanted to share with you that as of this morning, Milena, who has been quote unquote on the payroll of the Territorial Foundation that doesn't yet exist, she's been on the payroll for 2 months, creating a community transformation process, weaving together children, families, and teachers around how to do regenerative education connected to nature connection and emotional development of children. And Mago has been her partner in crime as an amazing woman who works with kids, who's very artistic and creative, who is fantastic at scaffolding the emotional development of children, but she's also a medicine woman, specializing in medicinal ceremonies with temazcal and with cacao. And she's from Mexico and has been in Barichara for almost a year, maybe about a little less than a year. And Mago has been apprenticing with Milena in how to become a transformational regenerative agent in the community by Milena being transformed by the way I've been mentoring her in heart-led work, how she basically leads from the purpose in her heart. And Mago approached me this morning to ask for help from the Barichara. What's that? Someone piping in, or is someone just unmuted?
All right, let's get through stuff. What were you doing there?
Stephen, could you please mute RJ, or RJ, could you mute yourself for the background noise? Thank you. So this morning, Mago approached me about seeking financial support from the Barichara Regeneration Fund to help her do medicine ceremonies, healing practices, and cultivating sacred relationships in adults to help them become role models for the children's development. And so Milena and Mago are both entering into this deeper transformational process, with Milena leading Mago into the process. And I just wanted you to know that this is happening, and that I found my personal spiritual calling in life, which is I'm finding that I'm really good at guiding people's transformation in this way. And Penny could speak to that if she wanted. She's gotten to bear witness to it a few times. So I'm starting a new spiritual transformation process with Mago as of this morning. And I just want you to know that this is happening as we weave the children and families into the other regenerative work. And the kids in the school that they're going to are doing lots of arts and crafts. Here you can see the kids are making animals because they're learning what their totem animals are, connected to some rituals that they did earlier in the week. As the kids are learning to embody and express the intelligence of the animals as a way of connecting with their own inner nature, as they're learning emotional and social skills interacting with each other. So they're not just doing an arts class, although arts class is worth it by itself. Yes, Claire, I celebrate art by itself, but they're doing it in the context of sacred rituals and nature connection. And so I just think this is an incredible thing that's happening that's so simple and so powerful. And of course, it starts with the children. And then, of course, Tyler and I are connecting to the land at Las Albercas as we sweat and grunt and get bruises and all these things. It's actually really hard work clearing the grass this way. And when people asked us, wouldn't we like to just hire a campesino man with a weed eater to make this trail? Our initial impulse was, no, we need to connect to the land. We want this trail to be forged with our own hands. And so here's Tyler. He and I have been leaving the house at 6 o'clock in the morning and going down to Las Albercas for about 90 minutes each day and clearing the trails. And it's been really powerful for both of us to have really deep conversations with each other and a lot of strong connections to the land. Meanwhile, Penny and Rachel, two earth regenerators known and beloved in the community, have been clearing the ceremonial space that's next to the Centropic agroforestry demonstration site that's in the bioparque. And they could speak, or I guess Rachel's not joining us today, but Penny could speak about what it's like for them in the mornings to go to this land. And they didn't create the ceremonial space. Actually, Mago and a group of other medicine healers in the community created the space a few months ago. But Rachel and Penny are starting to maintain it and open it as a way for them to connect to their own, I would say their own healer medicine and their own nature connection in the bioparque. And this has been happening in the last, 2 weeks, give or take, that they've been doing this work. While I've been doing my age-old practice of pulling invasive grass, building topsoil substrates, creating compost piles, and expanding the food forest system, which has been really nice to get back to. So that work continues. And I'm just enthralled by all these little moments, like my addiction to cactus. I've now planted more than 300 cacti. I'm getting Elise drawn into it. So now as we walk down the road, Elise and I collect cacti and carry them to the bioparque to plant them. All kinds of beautiful things happening with the golden orb spider, which is the strongest web in the world for any spider. For those of you who don't know, this is one of the gardener's best friends, the spider. They're fantastic at eating flies and mosquitoes. And this little flower here is from a bean called Cannabalia that we're growing in the Centropic agroforestry system to grow more, to put more nitrogen in the soils. I wanted you to see these are two native species to the region who are both beneficial ecosystem servants who are providing ecosystem services by being embedded within the forest systems that we're building. And so I just want you to see, say hello to the natives. Here's an arachnid native and a leguminous bush native that we are growing relationships with in our.
That's actually not Canavalia. That's
That's which one?
cotton.
That's no, that one's actually, oh wait, is it? Oh, maybe it is. Yeah, I'm looking at the base of it. Yeah, I guess it was interwoven with the Canavalia.
We've
come
been
in
trying to
different colors.
take out all of the Canavalia flowers so that they don't grow beans and waste
yeah, that's right.
energy
They look
because
more
we
like
want
orchids.
biomass.
Thank you for that, Jacob. Yeah, this is a native cotton.
They are beautiful flowers, though.
Good catch on that.
It's
Most of the
amazing.
flowers I've seen were yellow from another native plant. Thanks for catching that. And what I want to also say is that as we're doing this work, we're really opening ourselves into the space as we're opening the spaces. And while I'm not showing you the work of other people in the territory, that's because I am doing like 8 or 10 hours of meetings a day around ReFi Barichara, and I'm not getting out into the Barichara community very much at the moment. So I don't have a lot of photos of the rest of the community to share with you in the last week. I can just show you what I'm doing and what a couple of us around me are doing. What I want to really move into now is this bigger thing that's happening, which is what is ReFi Barichara really a part of? And why are we doing the Gitcoin campaign the way that we are? And how does this relate to everything in Earth Regenerators? And I just want to give you like a 5-minute walkthrough of the story. And the story goes like this. You know, I've been sharing Common Land's landscape investment model, and Benji's been teaching it and exploring it in bioregional catalysts. But I want to say is we are implementing this model for landscape investment, which is minimum 100,000 hectares, minimum 20 years, fund a core team, fund an ecosystem of regenerative projects. The regenerative economy grows 5 to 10 years later. And we are forging alliances right now around the world to be able to replicate this model. So those of you who know, Common Land has already started implementing this model in 15 landscapes. Eco-Agriculture Partners has created a project called 1,000 Landscapes, and Common Land Foundation is one of their partners. And they have identified 1,000 landscapes that if we were to implement this model in those 1,000 landscapes, we would restore the carbon cycle and stabilize biodiversity and do other very important planetary scale things. Now, for those of you who remember, the estimates for the number of bioregions on Earth is somewhere between 500 and 2,000. So this number of 1,000 landscapes is not an accident. These are 1,000 bioregions. That Eco-Agriculture Partners did a study of degraded landscapes around the world, that if all 1,000 of them were restored, they would turn the trajectory of the carbon cycle in a different direction. And notice the carbon cycle is not climate change, it's the biosphere. Every living being on Earth is a carbon-based organism. And so we're talking about turning the biosphere of the Earth. But what these projects that they are doing at Common Land and Eco-Agriculture Partners, their number one limitation is they do not have integrated landscape teams who are capable of setting up and managing landscape level processes. Common Land has now reached their maximum. They cannot personally manage with their own team more than the 15 landscapes they're working with, and they can't replicate their own team in the timescales needed. We are trying to create a bioregional design school as part of what the Barichara Ecoversity does. And so we don't want to just implement this landscape investment model, we want to replicate it. And that's where the Gitcoin grant comes in. Because yes, we launched a Gitcoin grant and we said we're prototyping a bioregional regenerative economy. But the way we're building our Gitcoin grant is we're experimenting with cooperation to gather resources and establish partnerships for the future so that this landscape investment model can be actively created now in Barichara and then replicated in other landscapes. And it works like this. If you've been following what we're doing with ReFi Barichara, with our 5-day event in the first week of October, is that we've been gathering a cluster of potential partners. You've heard the names of some of them. There's Regen Network, Gregory Landaway, Ryan Christofferson, and others from the Regen Network team are coming to ReFi Barichara. There's Regen Foundation, Revathi, who's the executive director, Austin, who's on the core team, and others are considering or are already planning to come from the Regen Foundation. Members of the Cello team are talking about coming. The organizers of Cosmoverse are talking about coming. Some of the key people at Ecolab, who develop ecological asset models and value flow supply chain models, for Regen Network and other groups are planning on coming and staying afterwards, etc., etc. Basically, we're gathering a cluster of potential partners around the design and implementation of ReFi Barichara. But because of the way that we're running our Gitcoin grant, we're connecting with those same potential partners and new ones. And Shane joined us today because Stephen has been helping us wrangle the holochain community into this space. Commons Engine, Commons Stack, Commons Action, Regenerative Community Land Trust, Basin DAO, others some of you may know, are all entangled in this web of what we're building. And what we're doing with both of these activities that you wouldn't know unless I told you now, is we're directing them toward the capacity to create regenerative bioregions. There would be no point in getting money for our Gitcoin grant. There would be no point in having a ReFi Barichara event if we didn't help this cluster of potential partners grow toward an ecosystem of collaboration that can actually birth regenerative bioregions. Which means we are building a landscape funding model with these potential partners to deploy into or to implement within Barichara and then replicate in other places. So if you notice, if you watch the What Are We Doing at ReFi Barichara video, or How We're Facilitating Emergence at ReFi Barichara, where we talk about systemic interventions and value flows, cultural patterns, the local economy, and ecological restoration within our 500,000 hectare landscape, so that we can prototype and build holistic outcomes like funding models, governance systems, and bioregional designs. All of that is, look, if you look at the design of ReFi Barichara, you will see this pathway to something bigger. We are prototyping the pedagogy and the model of collaboration for this potential alliance of partners who are all clustering together so that we can start with the Barichara Ecoversity, build this model for an entire integrated landscape, and then deploy it into other landscapes. Here I'm just showing you South America, but you can imagine this all over the planet. You see, we are prototyping a regenerative bioregion. This isn't like John D. Liu created a documentary about what China did back in the 90s, where it's already done. This isn't the All Beta project, where Neil Spackman spent 10 years doing it and then told the story afterwards. This is, we are 3 years in to creating the integrated ecosystem of collaboration for the 500,000 hectares of Barichara. We are entering into a formal relationship with Common Land Foundation. And as we enter into it, we are gathering a global network of alliance partners to be the sort of powerhouse ecosystem for how we fund and support each other to deploy this into a landscape and then later any landscape that's ready for it. We are prototyping a regenerative bioregion to spread this model around the world. And this is where I want to talk about what we're doing with our Gitcoin grant. As you can see, actually I took the screenshot a couple hours ago and it's actually already outdated. We have 74 contributors where a $1 contribution creates a $230 match, or a $100 contribution creates a $1,000 match. And that's how we've had $2,786 donated with a $16,000 match. It's actually larger than 16 at the moment and keeps fluctuating based on estimates of the matching funds. But we have until September 22nd to get these amazing matching returns on Gitcoin, which is like, wow, what an amazing way to gather money. But as some of you have seen within Earth Regenerators, while we're onboarding Earth Regenerators into the Web3 crypto world by offering trainings, it turns out that learning to set up a digital wallet is a real pain in the ass. Trying to put money on it is a total death knell. Trying to use the Gitcoin user interface and dashboard is like punching yourself in the face. That basically, these are not user-ready systems. This is like the internet in 1992. Where by 1995, you have Internet Explorer and Netscape Navigator with user interfaces to search the web. In 1992, you're still doing command line code on a Unix substation. The crypto world is like that right now. There are these powerful, amazing tools, but the usability sucks. And people are trying to figure out how to bridge it. And on Sunday, we did a 2-hour training with 10 people. That's part of the way we got to all those matching funds, is we onboarded a lot of contributors, and with the way that the matching funds work, the larger number of contributors you have, the more matching funds you get. And as we're doing this, we're not just doing it for our project. This is what we said in a post on Earth Regenerators on Saturday. We're offering a free training. Actually, we said this on Sunday for a call on Tuesday. We're offering a free training to get set up with these digital tools because trust me, you need the training. It's so hard to do. And then we give you $25 worth of Ethereum that you can play with. Why is that? Because anyone who's tried to set up a digital wallet and then work through all of the ways nation states are strangling crypto to make it nearly impossible to get security permissions to actually buy crypto and put it on your wallet. Trust me, it's a total pain in the ass. You set up your MetaMask wallet, you say, oh, look, I can use my credit card and buy Ethereum. And then it takes you through 10 steps of anal probe level scrutiny of your personal information. You have to give your social security number. You have to do like a legal background check. And then they reject you anyway, and you still can't buy the damn thing. It's really that bad. And some people still figure out how to do it in spite of how bad it is. And so we walked people through a process to complete the training with a MetaMask wallet, to set up a GitHub account, to link GitHub to Gitcoin, gave them some crypto money to practice, and then we asked them to support our project, the Barichara Regeneration Fund, and then 11 other regenerative projects. And this was the secret to what we're doing. We didn't just find a way to get money for our Gitcoin grant. We found a way to start collaborating with a cluster of projects within the Gitcoin matching funding round who are aligned with bioregional design, who are aligned with landscape investment models. And so we selected and curated a list of projects because they are conceptually aligned and they would benefit us and we would benefit them, and or they're coming to ReFi Barichara, or we're exploring collaboration for this larger infrastructure in the future. So we use the Gitcoin funding round to strengthen our relationships with our allies. And we're actually teaching some of them how to onboard their friends using this training process. And I wanted you to see this because while we're practicing pro-social to form alliances and preparing for a transformative 5-day event, we're preparing it all for this common landscape investment model, which is we're preparing this set of alliances to say, okay, so we got a core team and we're funding regenerative projects. We're trying to build the regenerative economy. How the hell do we do that? Well, we have to track value flows. We have to explore cultural patterns. We have to do ecological restoration. We have to create funding models and governance models. All those things that are part of the emergent design of the ReFi Barichara event. And the people who are coming to practice doing it, we're going to practice doing it to build these landscape investment funds for real, in the real world. And so that's what I want to talk with you about now, is how we are right in this moment where not only are we finding a clever way to get Gitcoin money and a clever way to get our friends to like us with their projects, but we're actually, I find myself wanting to use Spanglish, but in the other direction. The way to get someone to get involved in your project, in Spanish, they say involucrar, to basically turn them into a volunteer or to get them involved. And so I keep wanting to say, I want to involucrar those, like saying the Spanish word, but in the other, like I'm doing Spanglish from Spanish to English. So I keep like tripping on my tongue, trying not to speak Spanish. But I love it because involucrar is basically to recruit someone. Like, you know, get them involved in your community gardening project. We'd say involucrarlos, get them involved. And so we're getting people involved across the entire ReFi space and within the Gitcoin funding round. And some of you here, like Betsy, I loved our conversation the other day, where you were like lurking and watching, but now you're getting more involved. Like getting us all more involved in this tremendously complex work of birthing a planetary network of regenerative bioregions. And so I wanted to share this with you so you could start to see that there really is a deeper method in the madness here. That ReFi Barichara is a moment that lands between Cosmoverse and DEF CON, these two big ReFi events that bring people all over the world to Colombia. So we took advantage of that to have an event, thanks to Antonio Paglino's insight about the ReFi space. But who are we collaborating with? we're pulling in the people who are exactly the ones that could create this funding model and deploy it to the rest of the world. And thanks to Tyler, who just happened to notice by sheer synchronicity, the Gitcoin funding round landed right in the middle of this preparatory time. A 2-week funding round that ends a week and a half before our ReFi Barichara event. And we're starting to weave all these collaborations, send funding to our allies, recruit funding for ourselves, build our reputation within the ReFi space, just so we can land into ReFi Barichara. So I want you to see that it's like Gaia is conspiring to make this happen, is the way this feels. And so I wanted to give you this larger context, because this is how you can start to see not only the importance of the event that's going to happen here in a couple of weeks, but also why Gitcoin is not just a clever way to use crypto to raise money or a clever way to recruit support with allies. Both of those are very important learnings, but in the absence of this context, they still wouldn't be worth it. They still wouldn't be worth it. What's worth it is, how do we build the capacity to fund landscape scale regenerative work in any place around the world, starting with one. And so that's why I wanted to give the context in this way, was I wanted you to start to see that we are shaping a narrative. Like, just as one final comment before I open it to discussion. Right now, we're in the top 5 or 6 projects in the climate solutions funding round of the Gitcoin matching fund. And it fluctuates depending on the moment and depends on how you measure it, whether it's by number of direct contributions in matching funds and number of contributors and all of that. But just imagine if we got to number 1. Now, it's not because, wow, we got like $70,000 in matching funds. That's nice. But what it would do is it would get everyone in the ReFi space who pays attention to Gitcoin to say, what the hell's going in Barichara, just before the ReFi Barichara event. It shines a spotlight on our meme space, where we can spread the ideas of what we're doing to a huge community of people. And so what we're doing is so much bigger than this 2-week funding round. Just like what we're doing is so much bigger than this 5-day event. And that's the context I wanted to give you. Because I think that Antonio saw this coming. Antonio, when we started talking back in January, and he started talking about having an event in Barichara between DevCon and Cosmoverse, he sensed the importance of this. But I wanted you all to start to feel it with more richness and detail of what's happening. We're actually birthing the ability to create a planetary network of bioregional learning centers or regenerative economies, whatever you want to call them. We are birthing it right now. And this is so much bigger than Earth Regenerators. If someone thought this is what Earth Regenerators is doing, Earth Regenerators is a tiny little speck in a constellation of stars, because what's happening is so big. And so I just wanted to show you how, while what we're doing is actually extremely important, it's important like acupuncture. It's like if you touch just the right spot, it starts to recalibrate the connections between the larger system. And so I want to open it up to discussion now around questions or comments. I didn't go into a lot of detail about how we're forming alliances with the Gitcoin grant. I just wanted to show you that there's more happening behind the scenes than you can see, which is why I'm so damn busy having a lot of meetings this week. But I wanted you just to sense into what is emerging here, because otherwise it would be completely invisible. So maybe if you could use the hand raising, raise your hand if you have a question or a comment you'd like to share. Claire, please.
Yeah, what was going, yeah, again, really exciting. Thank you for all of that context and the excitement. And something that was going on for me while you were speaking, and actually has been since for the last while, is I recently went to, it was the Art Gallery of Greater Victoria had an exhibition on artificial intelligence. And I think what was so powerful for me about that exhibition was they had used some artists. It was a combination of, it wasn't just a museum and then running through like the history of artificial intelligence, but where it's going, which was actually, to be quite honest, I felt completely shaken at the end of that exhibit. And what really strikes me here is just, this is part of artificial intelligence with the human and landscape intervention piece. And it just, yeah, you just kind of wondered where this like absolutely insane world, sort of the inputs for the artificial intelligence are what's really, really frightening. And this feels like a kind of a counter to that. And I just wanted to say that that's what was really striking me. I really don't understand enough of it, but I'm excited. And I think the other piece I wanted to bring in was just how much trust and relationship are really important for me at this place, because I don't understand this. It's actually very intimidating. There is so much that is fraught in this area. And so trust and relationship are what, yeah, if you're excited about it, that's what's important to me. So
Yeah, I just want to jump in on this really quickly before passing to Stephen, because I think Stephen probably has something relevant here. But I want to say that the strength or weakness of these systems is the human relationships and the purpose. Like, what are we actually doing? What are we actually doing? What's the purpose? What's it for? Why? What are the deeper intentions? And if we were using Gitcoin to just get money for any old project, for one thing, there are several grant matching rounds, and only one of them is the climate matching round, which is a $350,000 matching round. There's another one for $500,000, which is just generally for supporting open source technology, which you can say, well, open source technology for what purpose? Well, open source technology to send smart bombs on drones to kill people. Like, you know, you see, like, without a normative context, says, what's this for? It actually can be deeply terrifying and horrible. And so the key in all of this is for those of us who have conscience to organize ourselves into a superorganism so that our collaborative abilities that embody those values are actually able to navigate using these tools. But you can see how that's not a straightforward thing to do. So I just want to name that this is a really big deal for us to explore and practice and cultivate the strength in our social norms and values, in our purposes, and also experiment in the space of some of these tools, which are actually very powerful tools. And we may or may not choose to use them, but we should at least tinker a little bit so that we can have an informed decision about it, which is just to all reinforce, I totally agree, Claire, and I'm with you. So now I'm going to pass over to Stephen.
Thanks. Yeah, Claire, you point out what I've been emphasizing where I've been participating in this conversation. It's not about the money, it's not about the crypto, it's about the relationships. Especially watching some of the elder generation try to engage with this conversation, and the cringe, probably the best way to say it, the cringe that both I and they experience. I emphasize it. This is a tool, a game, if you will, but not game in the way it's frequently used in terms of gaming the system to abuse somebody. It's a cooperation game. And that's what Joe has brought to this that I've not seen anyone else do. I've experimented. I've seen prosperity circles in the fiat economy, and I've participated in all kinds of money healing things. This is the first experience I've had of being able to come up against my cringe and go, wait a minute, what's Joe doing here? And I trust Joe enough to be willing to look and drop my blocks and my preconceived judgments about this and say, okay, how does this work? How is he working it? And the thing that has me excited when I get rolling and glowing is this interconnection of the different communities, because I see how I can connect. Well, it's kind of how Shane came in, conversations on Twitter. And then there's some members of the Earth Regenerators community that are part of the Terran Collective and a project called Hilo. And they didn't get brought into this first round of the 11 people we're recommending, but I'm bringing them in. I'm getting to have conversations with them because I know that the conversations I have are about supporting them and helping them. And yeah, I could keep going, but it really is, it's first and foremost about the relationships. And then there's some tools we can use. And the tools can evolve. If I stay focused on the relationships, then whether it's blockchain, Bitcoin, holochain, or something that comes next, they serve the relationships, not the other way around.
Yeah, thank you for that, Stephen. And I think one thing Stephen was saying about bringing in the people from Terran Collective and Hilo is that one of the things that we're starting to explore in this process of funding together with other projects in the Gitcoin round is what do we do during the 2.5 months until the next Gitcoin round, because they happen every 3 months. In the next 2.5 months, what we want to do is build a sustained relationship with a growing set of allies who increasingly frame their own projects on Gitcoin in a way that is more integrative. So that when we have a list of projects, they don't just loosely hang together because Antonio and I created the list in 10 minutes while we were rushing to get to the next step, which is how we prototyped this. And so that's fine. Prototyping works that way. Move fast, test it, keep going. That's how prototyping works. But when we have 2.5 months to sustain, deepen, and evolve the relationships, and then fund together, we can do things like I've suggested to Gail. Well, Gail, you could actually, through the regenerative project incubator, build it by project to put into the next Gitcoin funding round. Tyler, who's helped me set up my Gitcoin grant, could help you set up yours. And we've got a legion of Earth Regenerators who have MetaMask wallets that could actually help fund your project. And so we're doing community organizing, infrastructure building, relationship building, and evolving projects together. And this is the real beauty of what we're doing that is not within the 2 weeks of this matching fund. It's what we're building relational space for that continues when the funding round ends on September 22nd, is we just keep going and we go right into ReFi Barichara, because a lot of these people that we selected from those 11 projects are actually coming to Barichara. And so we're weaving real human relationships leveraged by a Gitcoin funding round and leveraged by Twitter exchanges where most of this is being promoted and leveraged by Earth Regenerators as a place of training people to participate who otherwise would not be able to participate. And so I just wanted you to start to feel the human richness of this that's not about the technology at all. The technology is present in a space of rich human relationships. And I just want to name that to really reemphasize what Stephen was saying. Stan, on to you.
Oh, well, thank you, Joe. And it's really fun to see the evolution of this group, include more holochain and more Web 3.0 and not lose the story and not pivot the story to being around the money from Gitcoin, but being around, is that a native plant or is that a weed? That's what we're having in our backyard. We're using artificial intelligence to identify plants and weeds. And my job is to pull the weeds. And then we're not doing mushrooms, we're doing heirloom tomatoes. And it's a great project right now. This is Harvest Moon, right? This is the time to be doing it. I love Claire's contribution. I think the challenge, I really liked, when you introduced us to Todd, he's not here, but he really introduced the word trust. And it's a special legal meaning, but I think that's at the heart of all this. The story that you lead with is the trust with your daughter and your family and the mushrooms. And I think that's so inspirational. And then as I watch the fundraising, it's not about the pile of money, it's about the matching of coherence around the trust. And it's really fun to see it scaling to commoning working to the scale of common lands. I think that's so impressive. So just like you said, Common Lands is missing the integrating team, but I think the team formation is missing the hero story. And so this is my, weekly fix for the hero story of biome. How does this going to scale? And the story of Common Lands is the most credible, one of the most credible things. And then we know it's really in your own backyard with your daughter that regeneration is tested the hardest. So anyway, I like all that. And then I'm really interested in Gitcoin. I've been involved with open source and the fight over colonization of ideas going way back. And so it is fun to see this incubation of open source. And I was just in a workshop with Web 3.0 for the National Institute of Standards. And, I think from Gail's point of view, there's in Web 3.0, there's a lot of focus on piloting identity management and data ownership so that Claire owns her identity and owns her data and agrees to Steve how Holochain has access or not to things. And so the scenario you talked about how screwed up it is to have to give your social security number and all that kind of stuff. That's at the heart of Web 3.0. So I'm so glad to be in a community now of developers that can incubate that. And this is the biggest issue for, for the web is identity management and trust. And they're looking for test beds like this. I nominated this as a test bed, frankly, Joe. I think that real estate development has always been the surrogate for the economy. And the Barichara trust models for real estate development are at the core of what we need to do in switching away from GDP and changing the ownership models. Anyway, I think this is a brilliant project. And I think at the heart of it is the storytelling. And I wouldn't discount the very first 5 slides. It's not just the Gitcoin stuff. It's actually the user interface. We know in the agile methodology, it's all about customer-driven trust. We just need to have somebody with good habits driving it instead of sex, drugs, and rock and roll driving it. So anyway, I love this stuff. And I think trust is at the heart of it, like Claire is saying. And then the embodiment of how to collaborate in a trustworthy way. I really appreciate, Joe, you integrating back with the digital infrastructure and curating that too. That's very impressive. Thank you.
Yeah, Stan, I wanted to just add, for one thing, I learned about the importance of identity, like our own identity and our ability to manage our own data, personal data management, about 10 years ago, just about how transformational that was. This during the time when Facebook was role modeling how to colonize the inside of your heart and your mind with all of your user data. And I know Holochain was built in part to create an architecture that would protect personal access and permissions around data use. And so I understand that history very well and deeply appreciate it. And one thing I wanted to say, just in harmony with what you just said, was that, is that when we look at this commoning approach, it's actually resonating really well. And one little piece of evidence I have for that is 2 days ago, one of my other idols, David Bollier, sent me an email and said, Joe, I've been watching what you're doing on Twitter, and I'd love for you to come on my podcast. For those of you who don't know, David Bollier is one of the leading thinkers and spokespeople on the commons in the world. And he's just a wonderful, sweet human being. And so for me, it was, I've known David and I have not really known each other, but sort of been mutual admirers for long enough that I wasn't surprised to get his email, but I was feeling very affirmed that he could see everything I'm doing is commenting. That I was making that visible enough that he was just seeing that clearly in the signaling, because we are building a commenting process and it's huge. Meaning that trust-based commenting process is huge. It's such a big part of all this. So I just wanted to reaffirm that. And then I want to pass to Paula, because Paula's been waiting. So on to you, Paula.
Yeah, I hope you can hear me. There's a storm here, so I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to express my appreciation for like the quality of the storytelling that you bring, and not just. I mean, we've been discussing about this ReFi conference that's coming, and the Gitcoin, and there are like a lot of people thinking about the crypto world. And you know, I used to work in finance and meet CFOs, and you know, and I was frustrated that everybody was sitting in the 20th floor of this high rise, and they didn't have contact with what's happening on the ground, and they were making decisions about the world without knowing the world and without having a deep love for the world. And it's one of the risks that I also feel it might be, you know, in the crypto world, about all these developers developing solutions without knowing like what's the texture of the process on the ground. And I think this conference is so sort of bridges that, and I would appreciate that, and I just hope it doesn't stay as a conference, but it sort of develops into long-term relationships. And yeah, that's what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Well, Paula, one long-term relationship I hope it builds is that we go from being friends to being better friends, meaning you've already, you know, we met when I spoke in your master's class a few years ago without me remembering that you were one of the students, and then reconnecting later, having you come to Barichara, creating the case study for the R3.0 blueprint, and just holding this space. I want us to have personal relationships, or us to have friendships that are textured and rich as we go about this work. And I just want to re-emphasize the wording of what you just said, of to know what's happening on the ground and to have love for what's happening on the ground. That combination for me is the 1-2 punch. Like if you have one without the other, you're blind. Like you know what's going on, but you don't love it. Or you love what's going on, you love the world, but you don't know what's going on. And one of the big things in the ReFi space that's a really big deal is how to do measurement. It's a really big deal because we do measurement wrong in so many ways. And some of the people who are coming, like a clustering of people coming to ReFi Barichara, work on a movement called DMRV, where D means to undo MRV. And MRV is one of those acronyms for the measurement system that's used for carbon offsets, which basically requires such a large scale and a certification process that's so expensive that only governments and multinational corporations can do carbon offsets. And if you wanted to have something like carbon offsets for your local community, you need to have micro MRV. You have micro measurements, local knowledge. And as Stan was saying, data ownership. The community owns their own data and they decide how it's used, and they use the data to guide their own economic development, but it's at a micro scale. It's like on my 5-hectare finca, you know, on my farm, we're doing agroforestry and we're measuring carbon sequestration, we're measuring soil health, we're measuring water restoration, we're measuring biodiversity, we're measuring economic productivity, all of it on our 5 hectares of land for ourselves and our neighbors, organized around our watershed. And this level of data analysis is huge for local economic development if it's owned and managed and governed by local people. And so this DMRV movement, which is, for those of you who don't know, there's a whole world of people who criticize monitoring and evaluation. So there's this thing called ESG and ESG reporting, and MRV is another one. It's like an alphabet soup where there's this whole world of a bunch of greenwashing bullshit and then a bunch of really wonderful people trying to undo it. And most of us have no idea it's happening. And so in the ReFi space, there are people who are trying to undo the bullshit of carbon offsets. And the way you undo it is by creating locally relevant, deeply contextualized data monitoring systems for the use of the local people for their own economic development. And this is really important when, like here we are in Barichara with a rain a rainy season that hasn't happened in 80 years, which means the El Nino La Nina, which is a temperature, sea surface temperature anomaly in the Pacific Ocean, which shapes the weather patterns of the Americas. Basically, if we can't look at how data from our local systems is connected to these larger systems, as the entire planetary climate goes through tipping points of abrupt climate change, we will not know how to create local resilient systems with that data. But how do we gather data? How do we share data? What the hell does it even mean in the first place? That's where this DMRV movement is people are trying to create locally relevant contextualized data sets. Yeah, RJ, it's exactly what you're talking about, MRV local. And so this is just one of the very important conversational threads that most of us don't even know exists. Where people who know what's happening on the ground and love what's happening on the ground, but the larger institutional discourse doesn't give them a place because they're so small and they fit between the cracks. So I just wanted to really honor what you were saying with a bit more richness. I know Paula knows this stuff, but for those of you who don't know this stuff, this is a very important world for us to explore that, that we basically need to get to a point where those who are working on these tools can actually make it useful to local people in their local work. Or we just don't even bother gathering the data unless it's usable by a local person. And if it is usable for a local person, build the data system right and be sure the measurements work. And so it's like, this is a really key piece, because as I've said in some of my writings and speaking in the past, as someone trained in Earth system science, I know that one of the most important research frameworks ever created was developed by NASA in the United States, and it's called the Earth Observing System. And it's all of the operational satellites, it's all of the river basin monitoring systems. It's this incredible multi-trillion-dollar data sensor network for the planet, which is why we can forecast the weather, which is why we can track the depletion of water, why when Hoover Dam has low water levels, we know what's happening in Lake Powell, et cetera, et cetera. The Ogallala Aquifer, which is this huge aquifer in the Midwestern United States. All of these data monitoring systems were set up by NASA. And the Earth Observing System, which was replicated, imitated by the European Union and the different space agencies there, have created all the inputs for our general circulation climate models and all these other things. And so we have this massive multi-trillion-dollar research system that enables us to see the Earth. And without that data sensor network, we're flying blind in the midst of abrupt climate change, or when we're going through a mass extinction event, which both of those things are happening. So these data sensor networks are important because we are embedded in an unprecedented planetary scale event, unprecedented. And so if we can't track the changes as the interlocking systems change, we're flying blind in like the turbulence of a thunderstorm. And so these data sensor networks are more important than most of us realize, but we need to build them local, for local economic development, led by local people, owned by local people, which is undoing colonialism, undoing corporatism, undoing the nation state, all these things that take away from the local. We have to relocalize all these things. And so the data sensor networks are more important than most people realize. And I just wanted to emphasize that a bit more. Imagine us trying to track extreme weather events or wildfires in California without Earth observing research and geostationary satellites. Just imagine the research satellite that was used to create all the operational tracking of wildfires was called MODIS. And when I was in graduate school, I studied another research sensor called MISR, which was on this satellite platform called Terra, because it was studying the Earth. And those research tools from 20 years ago are why we have operational systems, operational weather satellites that track wildfires. That's part of the Earth observing system. So any of you in the West Coast of the United States watching the wildfires are benefiting from the Earth observing system to do it. And so just to give you a sense of how deeply integrated these things are into our lives now, these data sensor networks are fucking huge and they're mostly invisible to us. So doing it locally is really, really different than doing it the way it's been done in the past. Just like crypto could be terrible or it could be wonderful, depending on how we use the tools. So I'm going to get off my soapbox or step on another one. Are there any other questions or comments, or shall we close?
I've got one, Joe. Yeah. If I could, I'm seeing so much of this through the lens of the planetary network of bioregional learning centers, what we're doing in the bioregional catalysts, trying to cultivate a support and learning ecosystem for all of this stuff. And then within the context of core teams, this conversation we had yesterday in particular, I'll post the recording to that in the next day or two. But, I'm trying to understand the patterning of how things unfolded for you. And then particularly within this conversation of funding, how that might play a role for others. And I've just thought about you as the crazy catalyst, the one who brought it all together, right? Who formed this core team. And you were able to do that in large part because of your Patreon donations and not having to worry about money. And so I'm thinking about the value of being able to dedicate your entire life to this if you are a crazy catalyst in a particular bioregion. We just really need to value and appreciate those people so much. And how can we enable them to do the work that they feel called to do and to answer their calling and their devotion? I feel like little bits of money placed very carefully could go a long ways and could be a necessary part of this maybe. And I'm just curious what your thoughts on that are.
I want to start by saying when I was 18 years old, I learned about something that I thought would be my dream in life, which is I learned about the MacArthur Foundation's Genius Awards. It's like, wow, there's a foundation that just gives $75,000 a year for 5 years to pursue your heart if you're deemed a genius by their secret way of nominating people that you don't even know you're nominated until you win. And I thought at the time, wow, that's amazing. Now that I've known people who nominate MacArthur Awards, and I know people who've received MacArthur Awards, and I've seen how just disgustingly elitist and privileged and aristocratic the whole damn thing is, and how collapse blind they are, and they're like nuclear, or high energy particle physicists at MIT who already gets $300,000 a year, give them the Genius Award. I'm like, fucking idiots. You guys don't have a clue what the context you're in is. And I had this dream at the age of 18 of oh God, I'm so creative and I'm so crushed by the thought of ever having to find a job. And what if I never had to work? What if eventually someone saw my worth and I became a MacArthur Fellow? And then later it was, Ashoka, and an Ashoka Fellow. And I met the asshole, arrogant, psychopathic pricks who select the Ashoka Fellows. By the way, several of my friends are Ashoka Fellows, and they're wonderful people, but they're basically just mascot toys of rich people, because rich people fund the Ashoka program. And it happens to do good in spite of that. But I met some arrogant psychopathic people when I lived in Seattle who nominate Ashoka Fellows. And I was like, this is disgusting. This is absolutely disgusting. Not because of the people. I mean, like I said, I know a lot of great Ashoka Fellows, but the system is so skewed toward rich people's little prizes of celebrating their social cause merits as they go to the cocktail parties on their yachts as the world burns. And yeah, I saw a lot of that when I lived in Seattle. That when I realized that I could definancialize my life and maybe get enough Patreon support to do the same thing with no money. And I started making a joke that I never wanted to be independently wealthy. I wanted to be independently poor. And it was a joke, because you're actually not poor if you don't need money. I just found that I got to a sweet spot where I could support my family on $1,000 a month and sustain it for about 3 years, which is what I did. And that's Earth Regenerators, and all these things happened during that time. And so there's a lesson in this. The lesson is no one's going to build it for us. All the people who we think might be smart enough or have the resources to build it for us are almost guaranteed to be entrenched in their own self-aggrandizing superiority. And even if some of them happen to not be that, we shouldn't waste our time looking for them. If they come out of the woodwork later, that's fine. We welcome the good people who have money. But I say this because we don't actually need very much money. We need what Stan was talking about. We need real trust. And what Paula was talking about, we need knowledge of the world and love of the world. And what Claire was talking about, we need this way of getting back to human relationships in rich context. And this is actually what I envision the ER fellows to be. When we talked about the Earth Regenerators Fund funding stipends for ER fellows to be deployed around the world, this was my little personal pet idea was, well, what if you had someone who went through the project incubator or however they did it, and there was a giving circle of people who pooled money, and like the MacArthur Awards, you didn't know they were about to give it to you, but you had actually been vetted and verified through the trust relationships of you as a human being with a human support system, with a good heart and a good idea. And then you would have training places, like you could come to Barichara, you could go to other places, Osa Peninsula, and others that were already cultivating within ER, and others that were not cultivating in ER, but that we can partner with later. And that we would deploy people to these learning places by setting up community land trusts and doing work exchanges for education to just nullify the need for a university education. Just go spend a year training in one of these ecoversities in a work exchange, and then get an ER fellowship to be deployed somewhere else. You see how none of this works without the landscape investment model. And that's this part of the story I didn't tell, because I would have scared us all off. I would have scared us away a year ago talking about that. But when we see that this is really possible to do by doing it in Barichara, people are like, how'd you do it? How could we replicate it? What should we do next? Then the story of the crazy catalysts makes sense, because they will find their way to these training centers. They will find their way into the support system, and we will learn to recognize each other. And we won't need any elitist from the outside with money to support us. And this is really key. And so notice I'm not saying it's not about how much money you have. We may have people on this call or around us who could put forth $100,000 or whatever to prototype this, but I'm not going to ask them. I'm just going to keep doing it until they show up, if they show up at all. And I actually want to make it independent of them, or so it doesn't depend on them. I don't want a codependent relationship with rich people. I want legacy for the future of humanity and the biodiversity of the earth with those who have resources to invest in that legacy, but that's a different story. Right, that's a totally different story. Yeah, Iris, I know I'm talking about you because we're going to do this for Osa next. I was already thinking of you even though we hadn't talked about it. But Benji, does that start to give a flavor to what I think we should do? I'm not getting at it directly because I think we have to sort of dance around it a little bit. But is this moving us in the direction?
No, yeah, it is, and I'm seeing where your head's at, and I'm just reaching for how we can best serve in the bioregional catalyst with all of this in mind, because I think that we are seeing it pretty similarly, and I think that we're at a point now where we it's funny you mentioned that you wouldn't have mentioned or you didn't mention intentionally the role of the landscape scale until you didn't mention that a year ago, because you may have scared people off. Well, I feel like we are at this like sort of abrupt evolutionary step where suddenly we're integrating that understanding, and that's what we've been doing with the common land presentations and the Four Returns labs and core teams yesterday. And there's just like this shift in everyone's thinking, and we're looking at these larger scales, and so yeah, there's a lot to process right now. There's a lot to process for us right now, and so yeah, I'm just kind of sitting in that, to be honest with you. But yes,
yeah.
that was helpful context. But yeah, trying to feel forward and where to go.
Yeah, I want to share one more thing and bring us to a close. So there's another piece of this that some of you have seen me mention, but only a few times, which is that as we're receiving the 500,000 Regen tokens from the Regen Foundation, we have talked, or rather, I have suggested in different moments that maybe we create a staking validator and a liquidity pool. And most people are like, their eyes glaze over and they don't know what that is. So I just want to tell you, the Gitcoin matching fund is a pretty close approximation to what I'm talking about. The Gitcoin matching fund is there's a set of institutional partners who put money in. So Regen Foundation, Regen Network put money in. These matching funds we're getting came from about half a dozen funding partners. And as you donate to projects, when you get to the shopping cart, you are invited to contribute money to the matching fund for the next Gitcoin round, which means they are crowdfunding the funding rounds with institutional support. It's a blended pay it forward crowdfunding model. So here's something we're talking about doing right now in the background, because it would scare most of you away who are afraid of the tech. So I'm not going to say much about the tech part, but I want you to understand the social governance part, which is there are these things called validators, which allow people to put money into a pool and get financial returns from increasing the integrity of the information system that people are using. And it creates value because people pay money for every financial exchange within the crypto system. And the integrity of that system requires the security to be in place. And as people pay those transaction fees, some of it goes to the support system of the architecture. And as a validator or as someone who stakes with it, you benefit from some of the financial returns of that. So if you take regen tokens, you stake them, you get some staking returns as more regen tokens. And I know that part's confusing. So just let it sit for a moment that there is a way to put money into a pool that helps support the research and maintenance of the ecosystem itself. And then as someone who's adding value to the system, you share some of the value. That's basically how it works. So it's a commons in that sense. But there's another piece, which is if you set up your own validator, then people can stake their money with you and you get financial rewards by maintaining the integrity of the system. And it also allows you to start pooling money together, where you can actually invite people to pool money and then direct it toward things. So Gitcoin has a matching round where right now there's $350,000 in this 2-week period that is being directed toward all the projects that qualified as climate solutions projects in the funding round. Well, imagine if we pooled money with our regen tokens and we set another one up with Ethereum, set another one up with Juno, which is another one is Atom. You don't have to know what these are. Just know that there are crypto infrastructure pieces where we could actually build an ecosystem of these and stake them together and then create governance. Why do we do that? So that we can do what the Gitcoin matching round is doing. We can decide the governance system for how money is pooled and allocated to regenerative projects. And one thing I'm asking for right now is I'm about to be connected to the head of the matching round design for Gitcoin to explain to him what we're doing to see if we can actually help improve Gitcoin for the next funding round. So Gitcoin might actually be the system we use, or we might create our own, or we might blend them. But just imagine if we built a big enough pooled funding system with decision-making that we could fund landscape investment models, that we could direct $500,000 to a new landscape because we built the alliance of relationships. So I just wanted you to know that while I'm not talking much about this part now, this is one of the things we're starting to build in ReFi Barichara as well, is how to create our own funding, our own ways of pooling funding with our own ways of designing governance. Where our implies a we, and we is whoever is collaborating to create these landscape investment funds for bioregions, which we don't know who we are yet. We're still figuring it out. But we're learning through this process right now some of the answers. So just imagine if we created a governance mechanism that could pool resources and direct them to landscapes and direct them into the training of people like these crazy catalysts who can help catalyze and activate those landscapes. And there's so many other pieces. This is why what we're trying to do is part of a truly regenerative economy, if we can pull it off. But I just want to name that piece because if you say, well, what if I don't like the way that Gitcoin works? Well, what if we just design another one? We're working with some of the technology developers who actually built Gitcoin. They could improve Gitcoin or build its next, make Gitcoin a dinosaur and create the next species of this that actually has better governance. And so I just wanted to name that as we're forming these alliances, it's touching everything. It's touching everything. Because we're in a moment where everyone who's touching a piece of it is finding we have to collaborate. And the one thing we are doing right now with our Gitcoin grant is showing how to collaborate using pro-social processes. And we want to direct that toward more ability to pro-socially collaborate across the ReFi space. And Barichara is the physical manifestation of this at the moment, which is why it's the living prototype for this process. And so it won't be for long. If we do our job right, Iris will be doing it in OSA in a few months, right? Like we'll be building toward the capacity to learn in multiple bioregions very quickly if we do this right. So I just wanted to name a little bit more of the context. We'll continue elaborating it in future calls. We'll continue elaborating it in the insane maelstrom of activities that is happening. Don't worry if you're confused and overwhelmed. I'm confused and overwhelmed. And look at how much of it I know. This is insane what is happening right now. But it's exactly what's needed if, and it's a giant if we can pull this off. I mean, we're doing something extremely hard and unprecedented. So I just wanted to name that to say that we're not just playing with how to form alliances, we're also playing with how to govern and fund these alliances. Using Gitcoin now and moving forward. And so Gitcoin is a great 2-week training round that we've got another like 7 days for. And one thing I'm secretly hoping is that our project becomes the most funded project of the climate round so that everyone in ReFi looks at Barichara. Just so that everyone looks and says, how did they collaborate? And then we show them. And so I'm hoping that happens not because of the money. The money is like a moment. So, okay, we got $20,000 or we got $80,000. That's not going to change things. But if we can change the way that people collaborate, we change the game. And Dana Meadows, when she created her 20 interventions into systems, #1 is paradigm shift. And changing the game is a paradigm shift. So changing to cooperation is a paradigm shift. Which is what Stephen was saying earlier. He's participating in overcoming his own internal cringe because this way of cooperating is a different game. So just naming, we're really trying to introduce a different game. Paula, please protract us a little more.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to say that #1 was paradigm shift in the first version, and then in the second version, that came #2, because #1 was like, forget paradigms altogether, like free yourself from paradigms. And this is even more powerful.
Yeah, and actually I think that's more what we're doing. Because you can't even figure out, like, can anyone name what the paradigm is that I'm working with right now? It's a blend of them. And it's a blend spread across a lot of you. And so it's not even the ones I have. It's more than that. This is so multidimensional what's happening.
But there's something that I first heard from Daniel Quinn, and somewhere in his writings includes the book Ishmael and Beyond Civilization, is by its very definition, a paradigm shift implies you do not know what's on the other side. So trying to describe a paradigm shift or what paradigm you're shifting to, if it's a true paradigm shift, we can't talk about the other side. We just have to muddle our way through until we can look back and go, oh, what the hell were they thinking back then? Because that's as gone as and invisible, or nearly as invisible as what's on the other side that we're headed towards now. And that can be exciting or terrifying.
Oh, actually, it's both. And that paradigm shift process is most famously articulated by Thomas Kuhn in his book, The Structure of Scientific Revolutions. Although we've later learned that there are some really significant problems with Thomas Kuhn's ideas. Not surprising, they're more than 50 years old. But the work in self-organized criticality and kind of pair box work, and the work in complexity science around self-organizing phase transitions is what we're talking about. By the way, that's what I studied in grad school, was exactly those processes. So the other day I was explaining how the matching, the quadratic funding works as an unfolding process. It is a self-organized critical state transition, which is a complexity science terminology. It's what I studied 20 years ago. And that's why I can guide the Gitcoin process, is because I'm applying my graduate work from 20 years ago as a way of playing the game. And so there are ways to understand how this works, but they need to become shared across people who don't always have the same paradigm in their head and actually are unlikely to, which is why we have to have deep trust. Like Claire said, Joe, I feel uncomfortable with this, but I trust you. That was a good example of that, Claire, of what I'm talking about. We don't always have to have the mental model ourselves to trust the process enough to continue. And we have to be open to learning, because otherwise we're going to mess it up anyway. What we're doing is so complex.
Hey, Joe, there's a question, the point that Claire put in there. I don't know if you saw about hustlers moving in because of the financial incentives introduced into things, which, yeah, I was just wondering if you could speak to that.
Yeah, I've been working on how to build my psychopath protection shield for a few years now, because I tend to attract a lot of psychopaths to me, especially narcissistic psychopaths. And so having dealt with that for a few years now, I've been learning how to make it really frustrating to be a taker in a giver world. And the biggest thing is to have such thick trust-based relationships, which take time to cultivate, which are slow and frustrating to someone who's trying to take. We actually put the brakes on it. To set it up where basically only those who cooperate win, where we create really clear agreements or social norms around cooperation, where we basically make it so that no one can game the system to gain against an ally, where I win and you lose when we're both playing for the same team. And so we have to build toward that. And a big part of it initially is to erase debt within our local spheres of influence, to decolonize our minds around money, to practice commoning, and to cultivate pro-social capacities. And the more we do those things, the more those takers will find this game very unappealing. They won't even want to play.
Joe, can I say, the thing that was sort of occurring to me is that, you know, there's virtually no competition for doing this work. Like, it's not financially incentivized, and you know, we're finding each other because we're genuinely there wanting to do this work. As soon as it's financially incentivized, you've got all kinds of people moving in, and it makes it, one of the things we've been doing in bioregional catalysts is just trying to kind of understand the role of the core team, like really get our heads around what are the role of the weavers, because that stuff hasn't really been fleshed out and talked about in enough ways that we kind of know what we're talking about, but it's just getting familiar with the roles and what we're stepping into, that, you know, and I guess people moving in with the wrong reasons of why they're coming into it, or maybe, anyway, it just opens up, and it like, it's clearer paths right now because we can see it without the financial incentive. But as soon as there's financial incentive, it blows it.
What's interesting
Well,
is I see 4 people on this call who I have walked with through a transformational process, which is the transformational process that I need to teach all of you. I've done it with Tyler, with Penny, with Stephen, and with Benji, each of them in a unique way. And it's what I was starting to do with Mago this morning, what I did with Milena, what I did with the team for Syntropic Agroforestry, something Penny has been watching and waiting for me to talk about. There is a way that I identify people and then cultivate a particular kind of conversation with them, or they identify themselves in my relational field, for them to open their heart to their personal purpose and then find whatever support they need for their next steps, and then bring whatever resources they need, which in some cases is money, and in some cases is not. And so there is a very powerful process that I've been practicing for about 2 years now that is deeply spiritual. And each of you who I've named will have a sense of what I'm talking about for you personally, because we've all had a very deep connection in a key moment. In the context with Penny, it actually turned out to be how we started our relationship was part of it, although that wasn't the intention. I mean, I wasn't intending to have a life partner relationship with her when it happened, but it was part of it. But there is a way that we create a heart-to-heart connection around the people who are heart and service driven, who would not take advantage of the money ever. It wouldn't even occur to them. And there are ways to identify them. They self-identify in the right relational field. And so as network weavers and network catalyzers, we have to get good at reading that relational field. And so there's a whole conversation about that for another time. But just to say that this is learnable, but I think it's only learnable by those who would already be inclined to do it. It may not be learnable by those who are not. Like, I don't think a narcissistic psychopath would be able to learn how to do this.
Well, I'm thinking of your concern, Claire, and it doesn't even exist for me. So I'm like, what? How are we seeing things differently? Like, okay, that's a good point. And where are people going to get? This isn't about getting rich. Like, at least at the moment, if you look at the Gitcoin thing, nobody's going to join that because they want to make a lot of money. There's no way they can. So anyone who's trying to, it's not a financialization for personal profit. It's a financialization for community projects in which I am supported. So at least from where I sit, I don't see how anyone would even want to try to game the system, because it would just be too, as Joe's saying, it would be too much effort. I have to work too hard to try to figure out how. I mean, someone might take on the challenge, but they wouldn't. I don't think they'd last very long, and it'd become clear pretty quickly inside of the field of trust. And I think it's good that, you know, it's not, I'm not trying to dismiss your concern. I think it's valid that, you know, every voice is important, and to notice that those concerns are there. Because I can rationalize my way into all kinds of trouble. So your concern just reminds me to be vigilant for where I might be dropping that awareness and someone could sneak in. So I just want you to know I appreciate, even though I don't see it in my world, it's not a concern of mine. It's a valid concern, and I appreciate you bringing it up.
Yeah, and I just want to add a little note to what Bennett dropped in the chat, that there is a whole world of exploration of the evolution of cooperation and of gaming strategies, which is basically strategies for interaction and relationship, if you wanted to generalize it in a way, which are hugely valuable domains of knowledge, hugely valuable. And this difference between finite and infinite games sounds confusing until you learn the terminology. It turns out being alive is an infinite game. It's open-ended until you die. You know, the game doesn't end while you're playing it. You never play the game and the game ends. The game continues after you die, if you think of the game as the biosphere. And so infinite games and finite games, there are a lot of ways to think about these concepts that we could start exploring with some focused learning with NER at some point. But just to say that there are ways that we can get clear about what Stephen was saying, that Gitcoin is structured as a game that would make really competitive people uninterested in playing. Whereas they'd love to play Monopoly if they could land on Boardwalk. You know, like that game is designed to show how a winner takes all. And so, whereas with these matching rounds, it's almost impossible for the winner to take all, because if you already have two projects that are funded, they each already got matches, and you've already made it impossible for one of them to take the entire matching fund. And so if you just encourage more people to create grant proposals, you distribute the funds in the structure of the game itself, which gets back to game theory and game design, which is how it relates back to what Bennett was putting in the box. So I just wanted to name that there is a realm of strategy development and design, very, very powerful and very mature and advanced realm of knowledge for how to do this. And a lot of it was just developed for video games, although it's of general applicability. So I want to honor the time and honor that these are such complex topics. It's good for us to stop and take walks and do other things. But I do want to invite anyone who feels moved between now and September 22nd, who has not supported our Gitcoin campaign. I'd love to encourage you to do so. And if you don't know how to set up MetaMask wallet and do all those things, you can reach out to Stephen, Penny, me, or Guy James. The four of us have said we're happy to do one-on-one calls to walk people through them. And Penny is setting up 2 scheduled calls, one on Monday and one on Tuesday, to walk people as a group through it. And we'll help you get set up to do that. So if any of you who hasn't done that and would like to, I think most of you already had, but if you'd like to, we can help you get into this game and to play it with us. So thank you everyone for the time. I'm sort of astonished at how far we've come in 3 months of almost 4 months of Barichara Updates. And I feel like we're just getting started. So holy cow, where are we gonna go next? I don't know, but thank you everyone. This is incredible just to be here with you. And I'm looking forward to going further with all of you in the days to come.